Well, I guess I'd like to begin with just how all of you came to be programming some of the most popular networks in cable, briefly. Guess we could start with Betty.
How?
Yeah, how did you, come to be what you're doing now? And
Oh, well, I guess rather than spend the whole night on all of our resumes, I came up through the ranks of on-air promotion and marketing. I started out in an ad agency, and then I did on-air promotion, oddly enough, for the earliest days of Lifetime, which grew out in 1983 out of a merger of a health network and a women's afternoon channel, and I was at the health network. And so it became Lifetime, and I worked there for a little while and then left and went to Nickelodeon and then Turner to launch TNT and then launched the Cartoon Network and then back to Lifetime almost literally 20 years later. And it's a very different lifetime, but I guess my history really is more, particularly with cable networks, and we're all from cable, and I know you're going to get into brand things, but cable networks have to think about themselves, always did, differently from broadcast networks, because the moment you're on a cable box with not 4 other choices, but 60 and then 100, and now today it's probably 300 if you have a digital cable box, you have to define yourself in some way as an idea that's bigger than the sum of your parts or your individual shows, because you just the sheer fragmentation aspect of it. And so I think in cable it was considered very valuable to understand both on-air promotion, which are the coming attractions and the logos and all that sort of stuff, to then how you market not just individual shows but the entire network. And that tends to often drive what sort of programming you're after, because you're thinking about what sort of audience you're after. And so I went from marketing to general management, which is overseeing marketing to programming, to what I'm doing now. But in terms of career history, some people will come out of sales, some will come out of programming, and I came out of marketing and promotion.
Some come out of law practices, which is not exactly the most direct route. I was practicing law, getting kind of good at it after 15 years. And my now partner at Oxygen, Jerry Laybourne, I was her lawyer in what she told me was going to be a minor contract renewal, where she ended up leaving the running Nickelodeon and going to Disney, which was sort of a big change. And I got hooked on the entertainment business. I had never done anything in entertainment, and I really still wasn't doing anything in entertainment. I was just representing someone negotiating a contract. But I really got excited about it. But Jerry was going off to Disney, and she stayed at Disney for 2 years, and she called me up one day and said, I want to leave Disney. You have to get me out of my contract. So I did that. And then she called me up in like 2 days before we were about to officially get her out and said to me, I want you to come do this with me. And I said, honestly, I'm so flattered, but I don't know anything about the cable business. I really don't. I don't even know what sub is short for. And so she said to me, it's short for subscriber, and we need a lot of them. That was sort of the whole conversation, and it seemed like a great thing to do. And when you start what was supposed to be a relatively small business, and you're only 4 of you, you end up doing a lot of things. From raising all the money we raised, to HR stuff, to legal stuff, that I kind of knew a little bit about, and start me on affiliate sales and distribution, and just one thing led to another. And lawyers are it's great training for a career, because you learn basically other people's businesses. That's your job at first. You need to understand their business as well as they understand it, so you can represent them and help them navigate through issues. So it was about learning the business, and Jerry's a great partner and teacher, and that's how I got here.
I can't say that I took a traditional route to being the head of a cable network. I started in film. I am one of the very few who spent 10 years very successfully in film in New York and made the choice to move into television. I happened to come straight into the marketing and promotion side as the head of on-air promotion, which through a long series of sort of little teeny jobs in between big film jobs was actually a direct fit. I had done both for many years as a producer. So the big change was being an executive at a big company instead of a freelancer. for my own company. And that was a tremendous choice and a tremendous change. I'm not sure I really knew that it was such a choice when I made it, like most things. And what I would say that was about 10 years ago. So it was about 10 years in film, and it's just over 10 years in television now. So every day it must be like when you move and you're like, well, I'm from New York, but 20 years later, everyone in LA thinks you're from LA. Everyone in television thinks I'm in television. And I'm like, oh, I work in film and I just took this job in television. So every day that goes, like literally, it was like a short-term gig. I was like, okay. And I would say more generally, most people will tell you that their career is built on a series of incremental choices presented to them along the way without a real game plan. And that through this series of choices and learning from the choice that you just made and being presented with another one, you get somewhere. So the series of choices I made led me to TV, and really very quickly, every couple of years, 18 months to 24 months, I would say I've had a completely new job in television, 5 distinct jobs in the 10, almost 11 years.
I started out on the legal side also. I moved to Washington thinking I was going into government, and I clerked for a judge for a year, and during that year Ronald Reagan won, and that ended my government career. And so I said I'll go to a big law firm and hide out until the Democrats come back. And so I went to a big law firm, but it took the Democrats 12 years to come back into office. And by then, my career had taken a detour. When I first started at the firm, I was doing oil and gas, which I hated, and then I did a little transportation, which I hated. And then I found communications, which I loved, and that's how I sort of got into the industry. But I was actually doing FCC regulatory law. And then I had a small client called BET, and I had been at the firm about 5.5 years, and at that point it was either time for me to say, okay, I'm going to want to be partners, I'm going to really buckle down and work hard, or it's time to leave. So I decided it was time to leave because I never really liked the practice of law. So I started looking around and did some interviewing in New York, but long story short, Bob Johnson, the founder of BET, eventually offered me a position as the first attorney at BET, and I started the general counsel's office about 20 years ago. I just had my 20th anniversary at BET. And it was a great time because the company was only 5 years old. There were about 80 employees. And we were all learning cable, and there were probably about 6 or 7 executives that reported to Bob, and I was one of them. And in a way, I was the only what you could call generalist, if you can call an attorney a generalist. I mean, there were programming people and advertising sales and affiliate sales, and they all had very specialized areas. But because I was the attorney, I think Lisa said this, I was involved in everything. Whether it was contracts or, for Xerox machines or building buildings. Someone said I oversaw the construction of our first production facility. I ran our magazine division. So over time, there were just business things that needed to be done, and I took them on willingly because I liked the business side. So it took me 10 years to get out of the legal side. I tried very hard for a very long time. And Bob kept letting me add on things, but never let me really leave. So I was general counsel and publisher and head of strategic business, and got to a point where I had so many titles, it was ridiculous. And so then I was offered the position as president and chief operating officer, which actually didn't exist until I was offered the position. So that really gave me an overview, and it still took me about a year to get my own general counsel, and convince Bob I couldn't be general counsel and president and COO. So that was a really happy day in my life when I got my own general counsel. I actually started sleeping better at night because it was really hard to run a legal department and do these other things because, even though as a general counsel you have to know everything, you don't have to know a lot about everything, you have to know a little bit about everything. but when you're doing a lot of other business things, it's really hard to keep up. And I really felt like I was at a certain point risking the company's legal liabilities because I was involved in too many other things. So 10 years ago, I became president, and Catherine said I became chairman 2 years ago, but it was only a couple of months ago. I became CEO in November and then became chairman in January. So I never intended to be here. It was a unusual route, but it really worked out. And having a legal background helps, even though it took me a while to stop thinking like a lawyer and start trying to think like a business person. But it was a great transition, and I was lucky to end up with a great company.
Betty, you mentioned branding. How important is that in cable? Obviously, it's very important. But also, I mean, you and Lisa are part of a handful of networks that are targeting women. How important is it to differentiate yourselves from each other and from we? And is any of your branding a reaction to the other person's branding? And is there a potential to grow your audience given in any cable, with any cable network, given that you are very specific and niche outlets?
Let's talk about 5 questions, and
Sorry.
let me try and address a couple of them. One is that actually I don't view women as a niche. They're half the population, so it's actually not a small group of people, and there's actually always room to grow your audience. It's funny because Lifetime, when you think about your brand, first of all, I believe, number one, that they remain extremely important. I know that there will always be these debates when you work in a TV, particularly at a cable network and also at a broadcast network, but people will sometimes say, I don't think people are showing up to Lifetime or Oxygen for the brand. They come to shows, and there's always this big debate over, do they watch brands or do they watch shows? And the answer is yes. I mean, you do have to have shows that pull people in, and they should be consistent with what people think you stand for. But I think in this age of explosion and proliferation of media choices and the appearance of things not just on the TV set but on your mobile phone and on the internet, that brands are going to matter more, not less. That whatever it is that people think Lifetime stands for, and I'll get to that in a second, has to now translate not just on the TV screen but on lots of different platforms. And the way in which brands now are things, whether it's a TV brand or whether it's a brand of clothing or a brand of anything, in a world of like a huge amount of choice, brands are almost like how people navigate. It's like I can't think of a particular thing, but I know the name such and such. So brands are really important in that regard. As far as how Lifetime competes, we're actually in an interesting place because my bigger competitive set, Lifetime actually plays in the general entertainment network sphere and in the women's sphere. So I think not just about Oxygen, but about TNT USA and Nick at Night, because they're sort of where Lifetime plays. We're all 90 million home networks. We're all competing with fairly high ratings and probably a whole other business model in terms of level of investment in original programming, our mix of programming and things like that. In terms of, I view Oxygen's brand as actually kind of more, definitely going after more of a younger woman's audience, whereas Lifetime has to be, our core audience it's both a demographic and a psychographic. A lot of our viewers are 40 plus, and I also have to mention that when you run a TV network, you think about the audience, and you also think about the business side, where your advertising dollars are going to come from. And there's these crazy breaks that might not be meaningful to you, but Nielsen measures things. The Nielsen rating service, there's 18 to 34s, and then there's 18 to 49s, and then there's 25 to 54s. And TV networks tend to build their businesses around either one or combination of those different demo breaks. And Lifetime's business is a combination of definitely 18 to 49 and also 25 to 54. So we think about, my sort of bullseye is a woman who's somewhere between 30 and 49. But in order to do that, TV's not an exact science. And so I would love, I go after 18 to 34s with some of our programming, but we're kind of more, I would say, mainstream, more mass appeal than I think Oxygen's trying to be. And I can't say that we're trying to be who we are in reaction to Oxygen, or we certainly pay attention to what they're doing. But I also am looking at sort of how do I compete with TNT and USA, and increasingly ABC and other networks. There are a lot of networks right now going after women, even though they're not actually positioning themselves in the women's category. So I actually view my true competition as probably any I look a lot at just who all are going after women in the sort of 25 to 49 age category, and that's sort of how we define our competition.